Good afternoon. This is a special meeting of the Duncanville Economic and Development Corporation. We'd like to call it to order. We will begin by saying we unfortunately do not have a quorum. So this is a gathering in which there will be no action taken because there is not a quorum. And so what I would like to do is to move items around on the agenda. Currently, number 2 on the agenda is going to remain. The next item on the agenda after 2 will be what is currently 4A. And after that, what is currently number 5, A and B, we will move to 4. Again, all focused on discussion, no action taken. And then the current 3rd item on the agenda will move down to 5. Hopefully that's clear as mud. Okay. So, the meeting has been called to order. The next item on the agenda is the invocation, which I will do, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance to the American and Texas flag. So if you will please stand. We are thankful for this day and for this opportunity that you have graciously granted us, dear God, to exercise the responsibility that you have given us to bring economic development and community development to this city. We lift up each and every resident of the city right now, and especially our staff, particularly those in public safety. We pray that you would just lead, guide, and direct us and help us do everything decently and in order. For this we ask in the name of your Son. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the DC-EDC budget presentation and board discussion. We will rule out the motion because we do not have an. Okay, so item number 1, Citizens Public Forum. To submit a comment via email and for your comments to be reviewed by the board, the following information is required. Submit a comment by 4 p.m. on Monday, May 5th, 2025. Email Marcella Perez, DuncanvilleTexas.gov. Email title, public comment, May 5th, 2025. Include your first and last name and address. So staff, do we have anyone submitted?
No, not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge, okay. So now, with that being said, we will go to agenda item number 2, which is DC-EDC budget presentation and board discussion. And we will turn it over to staff to lead that discussion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, so in your packet, one of the things that you saw was a chart, right? It was labeled draft FY 2026 budget allocation scenario, right? Key being a scenario because the intent was for it to stimulate discussion among the board, right? About what? About some strategic direction and priorities that will then inform staff to start to build and then bring back at a future date, right? Draft proposed fiscal year budget, right? Main thing is we, on the next slides that'll proceed, we'll take a look back at, year-to-date actuals. We'll look at some of the goals and budget categories from previous fiscal years. They tell a certain story. So as we move forward, we wanted to say, okay, if we had a baseline budget of $4 million, $4.2 million, what might be the reaction to this proposed scenario, right? Because it tells a certain strategic story of priorities that staff and board have been talking about moving towards in the future, right? So I wanted to set that context. Okay, this item is from the current budget, right? It shows just a quick outline program description of some of the activities that the department's involved in. It has some goals for this current fiscal year budget, as well as some accomplishments from the previous fiscal year. I even has a picture of a ribbon cutting. All right, again, also from the budget document, right? Further breakdown, both some of the revenue highlights, as we know, our activities are funded solely from our percentage share of the sales tax that are collected by the city, right? And so for that, this current fiscal year budget, the forecasted sales tax revenue, $3.2 million, again, as outlined in the budget document. Some of the expenditure highlights that's included in that document as well are highlighted here. Signature events, funding that type of activities, but also beautification efforts. Now, when we see a little more detail in the budget breakdown, we'll start to kind of see a little bit more like what goes into beautification, like exactly what is that, right? Because, just seeing that term, you might think, are we just painting, beautifying structures? The detail kind of flushes out a little bit more of those strategic activities. And then that last graphic, it just shows while the operating budget is more than the forecasted revenues, we see that both in the previous fiscal year and at least in the draft scenario that we put in the packet as well. So while, the city as a corporation, they have to adopt a budget where the revenues equal the expenditures, right? But as a corporation, and especially consider our fund balances, we'll see later, at least in recent practice, we haven't necessarily, limited ourselves to proposing and then adopting a budget that equal to the forecasted revenues. And I think in part because the nature of the sales tax in this environment, right, with some of the things we're seeing in the larger economy with retail and taxable sales, with e-commerce, with just the overall volatility in conversations with the budget staff, it's something that they're still really trying to fine tune, right, in terms of exactly how they're able to forecast those revenues. Okay, nonetheless, this is in the budget document that I believe is in front of us, right? This one says proposed. The sheet here we've got adopted, so there may be some differences in terms of that total amount. In fact, this one is 4.9 million. The proposed budget here on the screen is 4.8 million, right? But I think it will still give us the same illustration. We want to point to certain category items. Question from Mr. President.
Okay, not necessarily a question per se, but just to point out where we see this term revised.
Yeah.
The reason why I want to point that out is simply because I think semantics and words are very important. And I think in order to have effective communication, what the speaker is saying, if the hearer understands what the speaker is saying in the same language and terms, that leads to effective communication. So with that being said, you can't have a revised budget unless the board, the policymakers revise it, okay? And so as far as I know, looking over this particular fiscal year, we have not come together as a board to revise the budget. What a better term for what that particular column of numbers indicates, a better term would be staff estimated. Staff estimated. In other words, yes, we have a budget. Now that we've gone through the fiscal year, what has happened to this organization fiscally that would lead staff to come to the conclusion that what we budgeted, we're not going to receive? So that's staff estimated budget. And the difference between budget and actual may be so great that staff will recommend to the policymakers, we need to put an item on the agenda to revise the budget. If we take that action, yes, we have revised the budget. But in this particular fiscal year, as far as I know, we have not revised the budget. But staff is estimating and can reflect in their column of numbers what they think the final numbers would be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So that's a quick snapshot though in discussion of this. One of the items here in this first column under revenue, right? We know sales tax, right? That's gonna be the lion's share of the funding. But interest, and we'll see later in the slides where we got from the budget administrator the collection of interest from our funds. I think we'd be happy to report that there is an accounting for the interest. The challenge conveyed to us is that on the front side, actually projecting what that interest is going to be is where they're still trying to settle in on methodology, best practice, a way to do that, and then confidently publicize that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me interject for the benefit of those of us who probably do not know. I spent many years working in finances in local government. And so as a finance director, what my approach would be, and you're exactly right, it's so difficult to predict any number, let alone interest. What I would do in the case of interest is I would just put a number there, and it's a placeholder. So, because excuse me, cutting y'all. At the end of the day, the entire budget is just an estimate anyway.
That's right. So, that's right. And we'll see when we look at the year-to-date actuals. Even looking back, like if we wanted to do some kind of trend analysis, it seemed like we could make a good faith effort estimate. Again, just based on kind of the historical framework. And so that was good that we had a chance to talk through with her and show, like, 'cause it definitely stands out. We know we have $6-7 million in fund balance. Why wouldn't we be earning any interest on that accounting? And the answer is that, oh, you absolutely are. But in terms of this particular page in the document, the reason it's displayed as such is because we're still trying to settle on the methodology of what to report as an estimate or forecast. Okay. Let's see on this sheet. Another items, I'm gonna skip down to the bottom. This is a big number, in excess of $700,000 transfer to funds, right? So what that represents, in addition to what the organization referred to as indirect costs, right? So there's the corporation as a separate entity and its own dedicated funding streams. As an entity and as a staff, we still benefit from the services, property, the resources of the city as a corporation. So that cost transfer or application of charge to the corporation for providing, human resources, payrolls, meeting spaces, et cetera, those indirect costs. But also that number includes the debt service for the field house. And that's in excess of $500,000. And so, it has to be transferred from one fund to another fund to make that debt service payment. So there was some additional illumination given for what that line item represents in this particular budget.
And that was, excuse me, off, that was one of the questions that I have for the benefit of the group. I've got a set of questions that I'm going to provide the staff, after this meeting is over. But I know this was gonna be a discussion, and I wanted to allow an opportunity for everyone to have an opportunity to ask their questions if they have any. So.
Okay. To that point, we've got both the sheet in front of us as well as the table on the screen. Any additional thoughts? I mean, since this is like an informal discussion as opposed to a meeting where we're taking action, around the table before we move on to the next screen.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The sales tax and direct other taxes that we show as our revenue, item 51. We used to get a Excel spreadsheet that shows how our sales taxes are tracking month to month. Did we get that?
That isn't something I know wasn't included in the packet. The other question is whether we get it. Do you have any insight?
We give them. I have to double check one of the last report I provided you. I think I think we received a report from the finance department a few weeks ago that I need to share with you to show you where we're at with those sales tax figures.
I'd like to see where we're going according to as comparison to our neighboring cities.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I got a couple.
Go ahead.
Marlon, can you go back to the transfer for the field house? What line was that?
So in this sheet right here, that would be 78. Transfer to funds. Transfer to funds. And
So next year it'll be $0.
well, it won't be zero because included in that transfer to funds for the debt service is also the indirect cost that the city as an entity charges to the corporation. So if we look at, maybe if we looked at some of the other fiscal years.
The other charges are spelled out in the bylaws as it relates to the audits, the financing, the reporting to the comptroller's office, the use of staff time, the facility, etc. That's lumped into there. But moving forward, what you will see is transfer for that, but you should not see any more transfer for debt service since the debt service has already been satisfied.
Right. So I'm jumping ahead, but so this is as of April, Jennifer said that this is what's representative. So if we look at that item so we got the transfer to field house debt, and it ends, clicker doesn't go on the screen, but that last column it ends, and then below that, $120,000, right? That's the indirect cost. Right?
Second line.
So for fiscal year 2026, we should only anticipate seeing the indirect cost, not the $500,000 or so for the debt service. Yeah, paid off the debt for that. So, theory.
And one of the requests I made, Greg and board, when finance takes a second run at this, is to compare numbers in the adopted budget column for the current year versus the proposed budget for fiscal year 26. And on your sheet, that would be columns 2 and 4. So as I've asked that they go down each and every number between those two columns, and if there are variances of 5% or more, to explain what those are. So like in the case of the field house, okay, when you take out that field house debt, that's way more than a 5% decrease. So if finance does the budget in the way that I've asked, then an explanation is going to need to be provided in the line item which carried the field house. And the explanation will be the field house debt has dropped off for the current fiscal year, and what's left is A, B, C, D, whatever. And hopefully that will help us to analyze and maybe even answer some questions. But anyway, I interrupted you, Mr. Zilby.
So I guess the other question I have is, if we have a beginning fund balance and we're not planning on using all that money, is there ways to be more strategic about investing that money?
Absolutely. I mean, and again, as part of the intent for this discussion is it's like, okay, let's set the stage for bringing back a proposed first draft later this month and however more times afterward that's representative of that strategic allocation, like being more specific with how we want to approach this fiscal year budget. Not necessarily as opposed to how we've done in the past, but really just saying more intentional and strategic. And so again, that allocation table was intended to say, okay, here's a look at maybe how we could take some of the conversations we've been having informally about why have we done this historically, or why can't, like you say, we've got this surplus of fund balance. One of the things we baked into that table was that's not a part of the adopted budget is a contingency line item, right? And what that would be in theory earmarked for is, say we come across an opportunity to acquire a piece of property or invest in a really high leverage development proposal, right? Something that's going to bring a bunch of jobs, significant capital investment, but we don't have the budget authority, right, to move forward. But perhaps if we have a line item for those said strategic purposes, we come back to the board, maybe executive session, like, hey, here's what we have, and maybe here's a line item where we can get the budget authority to move forward.
So Greg, to piggyback on what Marlon has just said, in terms of investment, and I'll just approach it from that perspective. In terms of investment, the city of Duncanville, like many cities in North Texas, has a investment policy that's guided by the state's Public Funds Investment Act. And so, as I heard your question, here's what I understood. We have millions of dollars just kind of sitting there. So how can we invest that money to get quote unquote maximum return while we were waiting for the home run that Mr. Goff was talking about to come? So as I understand the city's investment policy, I think the longest that they can go out on investment is 2 years. And that's a conversation I think that we should have as soon as we get through what's immediately before us. Have a conversation with finance and have them come in and talk about the Public Funds Investment Act. And then after we have an understanding of the city's approach to it, then say, okay, what are we as a board most comfortable with in terms of how long we want our investments to be? Because of course, you know, the longer the investment, the more return you get. That's the way it generally works. But we don't want to necessarily have everything tied up in something long-term and then have to pull it out. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but a 3 month or a 6 month, some sort of ladder that you could say, we could ladder some of this money out, so it's just not sitting there earning essentially nothing in a checking account.
And that's part of the discussion that we can have with finance.
Then the other option is, does the city have a need that we could loan them the money and then they can use it instead of taking funds out?
Yeah, and the city did that before. It was some years ago. I can't remember what it was, but you were right. One fund, it was when Richard Summerlin was finance director. One fund loaned the general fund some monies, and that helped save the city some interest. So I know it's been done before.
Just
Sir.
Mr. I have a question for Mr. Shelby, just from my understanding. So the city has adopted an investment policy. Those are for the, as I understand, for the general funds, etc. Would a separate policy need to be created for the corporation for its funds and through the bylaws? Because I know that in some communities, the funds are separated out in separate accounts. So as we're going through these bylaws amendments, does it make any sense for, and because the question was asked, does it make sense for the corporation to set up its own investment policy? And it's quite possible that maybe it could mirror, be really close to the city's investment policy, but is that standard practice? Is it necessary? Is it not necessary?
And I'm sorry to interrupt you. One thing I forgot to say, in my experience as finance director, when we crafted the city investment policy, we said, okay, this is how long we want the investments if it's for the city. This is how long we want the investments if it's the EDC. Maybe we should check to see from finance if the city has already provided guidelines for us in the city's investment policy. So, and I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just saying, you know, the work may have already been done for us.
It's possible. It's just a
The
very
answer-
unique situation.
You can have your own separate policy.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I have a question about the transfers from the EDC to the city. Are those documented and itemized, like what we're transferring for? Or is it just, hey, we need?
Yeah, so this is this is the current adopted budget to date, snapshot, right? And so as of April, I think she told me like mid to the end of April. Okay, so if we look here, the line item, non-departmental transfers, transfer to the field house for debt, that's the amount, right? From EDC fund to the field
I
house
think
fund.
what the attorney is saying, what's the underlying rationale for the amount that's transferred, right?
Yes, so they say 60,000 for, you said the building,
And these debt service.
it's mostly debt, it's all debt.
That's what it is. It's my understanding. Would you say that's the case, Greg? The payment we've been making to the field house for debt service?
No, not the field house, the other payment.
Oh, the other payment is the indirect cost.
Right, or
And
those
so-
itemized is what I'm asking.
Well, what we started off talking about is we'll just say the unclarity of how they arrive at that amount. Like there isn't a specific formula that choose in a position to share that they follow. It could be based on the percentage of, we just throw something out there. How many POs are we processing for economic development? How many employees? How many of these various costs of operations, right? That a normal department, say this was HR, this was Parks or Public Works, we wouldn't have any direct costs. Their operating budget, this would cost to do business. But through the C, it's a separate entity that they still get the benefit of being housed here at the city, right? Using this
That
meeting
answers my
space,
question.
for example. Yeah, and so it's, when I ask her that, it's like, hey, help me understand so that I can better explain. Not questioning why we would pay this, because it's commonplace, but
There's certainly
how
some-
do we arrive at that amount, right? So that's not so clear at this point.
Yeah, that was my
Yeah.
question. Sorry.
Yeah, inquiring minds want to know.
But anyway, to our attorney's question, that was one of the questions that I had on my sheet, which you'll be getting tomorrow.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike.
That's what I would. Great, but we're still tracking any more questions. At the last one.
But through the current bylaws, or the current bylaws stipulate that there should be invoices that are prepared and charged. And so this would be an opportunity to either go to that practice or make changes to that section of the bylaws, something that's maybe more palatable, easier to process, so we get ahead of, maybe not get ahead is the wrong word, but we handle these expenses in a different manner than been doing in the past. It's just a dollar amount transfer, that it's a specified amount with predictability and checks and balances. And so that's something that we'll have to discuss, what is the best practice, because this relationship is very unique.
Okay. Greg, did you have any other questions? Ms. Thompson?
Just one. Item 79, other financing uses, does that speak to what we just discussed as well? Or is it something completely different?
This is gonna be under Economic Development Administration,
These are the incentives, the 2.3.
finance uses, yeah.
So the 2.9 falls under the category of development incentives. This is the $2.3 million that we use for grants as they come in. But one of the things that we'd like to do, and we still have to figure out, is the 2.3 and the ending balance and the encumbered dollar amounts can be tricky, because the ending balance, today's ending balance may not be reflective of dollars that have been encumbered, that are out there that we're waiting to collect. I always kind of refer to it as our own personal checking account, right? The balance on our checking account statement will say a certain dollar amount, but if there are debts that are going to hit the account, that dollar amount in the account balance in our checking account won't necessarily be indicative of how much money we actually have, right? Because we have these funds. This is, to some degree, a similar situation. That we want to be in a situation where the money that's in there and the ending balance is pretty close. We have situations where the grants are going over into another fiscal year, and because those dollars are encumbered, when you look at your budget and you say, oh, I have $2.3 million to work with, yes, that's true, but there could be potentially $500,000 of previous grants that have been awarded, that are out there, that are going to come in seeking reimbursement. So right off the bat, if you start off the fiscal year, you could be in a situation where you're not necessarily working with 2.3, you're working with 1.7 or a dollar amount, because you have these grants that are out there that have been awarded that are going to be coming in for reimbursement. So that's a tricky one that we have to work through to be able to tell a better picture and to provide us with better goals, better strategies about how to award these dollar amounts, because you have those that are moving over. One idea that's been tossed out is just reduce, depending on the dollar amount for the grant, reduce the timeline for the work to be done to ensure that that money comes in during that fiscal year, so you don't have it carrying over multiple fiscal years. Or the other one is, depending on the timing of the request of the grant, see if it's possible to have that applicant wait until the approval of the new budget, so then you could start out with a full 12 months to work off of. That's a bit tricky, but we have to work through that to really get a handle on how much money the board does and doesn't have to work with for that fiscal year.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
So yeah, that's a good idea. We would like to be able to do that. But here's an example. Let's say that we have an entrepreneur that comes in that has really good backing on a particular enterprise, and he's trying to do something and it's all time sensitive. So let's say he puts together all of his paperwork in August, and then comes to us in September and, blows us all away with their presentation, and we support it, okay? And it may be within the budget for this fiscal year, but all the expenditures are not actually going to happen until the next fiscal year. So what's happening is that as those expenditures are coming through, okay, it's going to make the next fiscal year like it's way over. But the reality is it's over because something that was approved toward the end of one fiscal year is actually happening in the next fiscal year. That's the tricky part. But certainly if a person has a good idea and they come to us in August, we're not going to tell them, oh, we just can't do this right now. Come back in October. Make sure we have it all in one fiscal year. No, we'll figure it out. Sir?
If I may, one of the other things that we discussed internally at a staff level is that the corporation has a number of other tools that are available and at its disposal for businesses, that the corporation should at no point in time feel that the grant option is the only option for these businesses. You could do a sales tax sharing agreement, you could do a property tax abatement. Now, those are tools that maybe have not been used in all or some purposes, but they can be, and that moving forward, what we'd like to do is, when we're talking to these businesses, figure out which might be the better tool for them, so you're not automatically having to go to the incentive fund, if you will, because what we're trying to do is utilize all the tools that the corporation has at its disposal to spread the wealth, to get more opportunity, to get more to businesses, that sometimes the incentive tool, the grant tool, it's an opportunity and it's assistance, but there may be other tools in the toolbox that may be far more valuable to the business community and to us, that we may want to use a bit more than maybe has been used in the past, to free up and keep these incentive dollars for other purposes. So you're basically finding creative ways of doing more with the tools that you have. And so we have to figure that out at a staff level, what that would look like. But that's something that we'd like to bring forward to you and say, okay, here are the other tools. Because that's one of the differences that between the city council and the Economic Development Corporation, that there are more tools, more strategies that are available to the corporation than are with city council. So we have to kind of navigate through that.
Yeah, which is why I say we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
A couple things though that came up in both of the discussions about just timing of when projects materialize, what critical paths, schedule they may be on, just again, depending on the nature of the project, the financing, all of those things. But also more specifically as it relates to our current and internal practices with respect to like different types of business grants, sponsorships, requests for donations, right? Also some internal discussions, and a little bit of that has been highlighted in the packet when we talked about draft revisions for our incentive policy, right? Just in terms of staff being able to be more efficient, factoring in the implications of the fiscal calendar year and the budget, some thought to creating an application period, not necessarily for, like Victor said, those truly economic development, real estate development, investment projects, but for the grants, right? Whether they're organizations, whether they're businesses that they just, looking for a grant to help maybe offset the cost of signage because they spent money on the build out, whatever the case may be. If we just have this open-ended application period, first come, first served basis, not necessarily any caps on what you can request, like those are some of the conversations that we've been having internally as a staff, even some of the board members that we've had individually on and off the record. I think as it relates to that timing piece, and it just triggered a thought for me, is that's something that we'd like to offer for discussion or consideration. Talk about the merits of that. Marcella's not here, but her and I, she's had a lot of time and thought put into it, and just in the week or so that I was here, she's kind of shared some of that. So that might be ripe for some of our ongoing discussions about, our incentive policy and looking for ways to better manage that. And when I say better, again, just being more efficient, right? Making sure when we look at that allocation, how much are we comfortable with setting aside for donations or sponsoring? And when I say sponsoring, we'll say the events that aren't also signature events for the city. Like we know what those all are. Right, for example, all of the events that Devin's quarterbacking, right? We'll just say that's simple and plain. Like, but we get a lot of requests for events that are not necessarily ours, but they're opportunities for us to support the greater community good, maybe marketing, we supporting quality of life, things that are still, we can make the case are a good investment for, the community. But how do we better approach that in terms of our fiscal calendar, our grant administration, right? Because we kind of categorize those different, those beautification activities, those, charitable community sponsorships, different than projects. Any thoughts?
Well, I'll say that a good budget discussion is more than just giving this so much money and giving that so much money. It's about a marshaling of effort. In other words, what is it that's going on that we are maybe not doing that we need to address? And then those sort of things may not necessarily require money per se, but what it does is it helps us know how to address a particular problem. Like, what do we do with donations? What do we do about this matter or that matter? And so that helps us set the focus for what problems we want to address and solve moving into the next fiscal year.
No, that's helpful because the difficulty comes in when, we'll have a lot of times, whether it's applicants, community organizations, charitable, for-profit or not, right, in search of funding. And if we don't broadcast or establish the types of investments we're looking to make, the types of initiatives we're looking to support, right? The types of grants we're prepared to make based on this work plan or fiscal year, then we're tasked with subjectively evaluating the merits of unsolicited requests for funding. Right? That's the challenge, but it's part of the job too. But I think, but would help me if we could point to policy, strategic policy plan of the board, then we can, convey that message to the applicant, and it not coming across as we're picking favorites or winners. You're saying it's not eligible. Well, show me where it says that. Either in your application or in your policy or your strategic plan, right? But if and sometimes it's not so much that it's ineligible, it's just we're prioritizing these types of activities, the business retention, the expansion, the recruitment, projects or asks that we can clearly point to that's going to increase the assessed value of the property where you're operating. It's going to generate sales tax or more. It's going to create jobs. It's going to do these things as opposed to, supporting the community. Like, what does that look like? I mean, but maybe the paint grant helps remediate an otherwise blighted property. And you're also making an investment in the property. We're just participating in that investment. See, those are different, but sometimes, believe it or not, we get asked that there is no other participation. It's just, can you fund or make this contribution, this donation, this grant? And I think it would be helpful if, we had some type of strategic document statements that we look at us as we want to make investments. That's different maybe sometimes than we want to make donations. Sponsorships may be tied to events, but not we want to sponsor your operating costs. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I hope that we come away with as an organization to this effort is to come up with a set of guardrails within which we will consider, outside of which, unfortunately, we don't have the resources to do it. One thing I've learned about doing a budget, and that is the ask associated with a budget is like this, but the provisions associated with the budget are kind of like that. So we're going to have to make choices, and hopefully the choices that we make will wind up to be the ones that will give us the greatest bang for our buck.
Okay. So this scenario, right? I do want to get some feedback, because this isn't necessarily a budget document that you would expect to see in the draft, but it's thought exercise that, again, based on if we had anything close to this allocation of activities, right? It's still a budget, and we've seen in the other draft where if we, had a baseline budget of $4.2 million. We know the projection of revenue is a little bit different. We talked about that, how that's been over the last couple of fiscal years, but any thoughts, anything that jump out absolutely that's way off from what you're thinking individually, collectively, as a board?
Are the percentages correct? Are they true?
Yeah, again, based on if we have $4.2 million, right, and we've got those 8 categories, then the percentages mean is the percentage of that $4.2 million. That's what's represented.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I had it documented somewhere, but now unfortunately it's gotten away from me. Those categories that you see on the screen, here it is. I broke them down into 3 categories: economic development, community development, and administration. And so out of the $4.2 million, 74% is for economic development, 10% is for community development, and 16% is for administration. And that is the 50,000-foot breakdown of that schedule.
Okay. Let's go with that breakdown. Thoughts associated with 74% of our budget connected to economic development, and then another 10% to community development. Before we do that, if I may, like, how would you define the difference between economic development activities and community development activities?
Well, I'd say an economic development activity would be something like going in the community to a business and seeing how they're doing and seeing if there's any type of assistance in our toolkit of helps that we can get to them. Community development activity, in my opinion, I'm so glad the nice young lady is here. But what she does is she puts together plans so that we can do like a 4th of July festival. And I call that community development because that's something that is directed primarily for the people.
Okay. Thank you.
So if somebody if a citizen comes and wants to know, well, what am I getting out of this budget? My first response would be, well, let's go down the list. We got Christmas parade, we got Juneteenth, we got Mayfest. I'm gonna call it Mayfest. I don't know what the name of it, the thing we keep postponing.
Bloomfest.
Bloomfest, I'm sorry, yeah. We got 4th of July, and I'm sure I'm missing one or two, but anyway, these are the things that the economic development is programming for the community.
Signature events, free events, come out,
Mhm.
enjoy, celebrate. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
I guess kind of my comments are the percentages are based on your budget, but what are we trying to accomplish and where are we directing the money? And to me, that's the way you really need to look at it. Instead of saying I'm going to take so much of my budget and use it this based on these numbers. So I'm kind of challenged with that chart. The other thing is I'm challenged with is that we're getting dollars transferred in from other accounts from the city to support staff and administration things, which are not part of our EDC budget, which to me, we should be focused more on the dollars that we control, which are those tax dollars, not dollars that come in from another avenue.
Okay. I'm gonna start with the last first.
What's that?
I'm gonna start with the last point first, and then we can talk about
That
the
if
priorities.
you have staff that is being sponsored from the general fund for some account from the city, and that those dollars are journaled over, those are not dollars that are coming out of our sales tax revenue. Those would be other funds transferred in funds. So to me, we should be focusing in on how our sales tax dollars are being used, minus those transferred in dollars, because we really don't have a say over how the city manager wishes to journal in those dollars and set those funds up.
And I may be confused, but I don't think I think we're transferring out.
I thought we were transferring some funds in.
So when you say transfer, then you're saying we're receiving other revenue from the general fund? No, I think.
Because I thought when Mr. Finch was here, he was talking about the fact that that there was a reallocation of dollars and to try to streamline some of the operations that those dollars would be coming in from here as a journal.
You
I
mind
think
if I
it's
speak
the
to
opposite,
that? Here in this document, it does say in this year's budget, transfers from other funds is 401,490. That's what you're.
Those are dollars that I'm not quite sure where they're coming from, but
Okay.
not that it's a huge amount, but it's an amount that if they are general fund dollars that are going to offset staff labor costs, we have no control over that. So to me, I'd like to focus that we're drilling in more on the dollars that we control. And then if we supplement, say we match what the city provides out of our funds, then those are dollars that we can control the match. So if we were to take a position and match half of the position, city pays half, we pay half, then yeah, we have control over our half, not the city's half.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense. A question, one of the questions I have is on a line item like that, what's the detail? You know, what does that represent in terms of initiative and dollars? Because it's probably that size, that amount of money is not coming to from one fund. So the point that I'm making, perhaps we need to get with finance and have them explain what that is, and then knowing what that is, we'll be in a better position than do we need to do something about it.
Yeah,
Makes
and
sense?
if I'm incorrect, then fine. I mean, I just don't know how the funds are to her level, the finance director's level, how she gets down into the T account stuff of moving the dollars around.
So what we'd like to do is we'd like to get all the questions. Mr. Harvey, you have a handful of questions you're gonna be providing us. You have a question that's come up here regarding that transfer funds. What we'd like to do is get the answers to all those questions and send it out to the entire board. Have them work with, I always like to have the entire board work with the same information, even if they weren't here. At the conclusion of this meeting, I will send the recording for those that weren't able to attend to see what was discussed, the questions that were asked. This evening, we went into discussing specific line items, specific transfers, etc. But really, for me, this was an opportunity to present staff's idea of what different would look like as it relates to the grant structure and how and where we spend our efforts. You know, it was an opportunity based on the directive that we received a few weeks ago about doing something different and taking that 3-year snapshot of what the last 3 years have looked like as far as grant awards and everything. And what we heard was, show us something different and what different looks like. So this is our first attempt to share with you what that different would look like, specifically increasing our efforts towards business attraction, business retention, and reducing some of the dollar amounts for the other type of requests. And so what we have here is a proposal of what that would look like. And we're using this as an opportunity to solicit the feedback and say, hey, do you like this? Where can we make adjustments? You know, because we think that the board's best time and maybe best bang for the buck return on investment is geared towards business attraction, business retention activities. We can still participate with signage, with landscaping, but those dollar amounts would be less because we're gonna be focusing a good portion of the dollars that are available to us, whatever those dollars are, towards maintaining jobs, attracting jobs, generating revenue, and we want to come to an agreement that it should be a larger percentage of the available dollars every year moving forward, whatever that dollar amount is. But we can come to an agreement that the percentage should be higher. And this also sets the stage for, you know, for the grants and doing something different. At the last meeting, we presented at SENA and an amendment to the economic incentive, and there was conversations about clawback and guarantees and return on investment and all of that, that moving forward, that we would change the grant structure to have that in place. There's been ideas tossed around about participating with signage, but maybe only participating with half the signage cost, not the full 100% cost. And again, just laying this out a little different. But this is where I say it all comes together, what we've been talking about the last few months, about making changes to the incentive policy, making changes to the grant structure, and this all kind of also rolls into the procurement policy and the bylaws. It's all coming together, and this is all why it makes sense. And the other part of it is that we're also doing the comprehensive plan, and this evening, the comprehensive plan steering committee has a meeting at the CoLab space where they're talking about a draft of the strategies, implementation matrix, and who's responsible for the several items that are laid out in this strategy, and how the strategies in there will lay the groundwork for the work plan for the various boards and commissions, and the strategic plan for staff and the boards and commissions, so they're all in alignment. Yes.
So I agree with you, and that's what I said a few minutes ago in terms of where will we put our energy and effort as an organization. That's another way of saying work plan.
Yeah.
So then, when we finish this process this particular year, we should have a work plan, including some of the items that you just mentioned. And so I believe that we are all saying the same thing. We just need the time, which is why I think this is going to take another meeting. This was the first part. And the other part is to get it done.
Yes, and because it requires more time, this is why we need to take another look at when we have the budget discussions next year, and when we have the joint meeting with City Council to lay that out. Because again, this all comes back to how it's all related to the bylaws and the dates and the meetings, the quarterly meetings, the scheduling of the invoices. This is how now it's all coming together.
Go back here, Greg. So the first part of what you said is looking at that allocation scenario is difficult if you don't have goal statement, priority. What are we trying to do? So one of the first graphics we looked at was the current budget, right? And it states what the goals are for this fiscal year, right? So that would be an example of how those statements or bullet points would be tied to that allocation table. I didn't want to go in and write out what the goals were. I wanted to work backwards.
No, I understand.
Say this is what it could look like if we just take the conversation and some of the things that we've been talking about internally as a staff, informally among this board and this group. Here's maybe how this could look, get your reaction to it, and then what does that tell us? So this is essentially what we'd be working towards, 5 or 6 bullet points that spells out the priorities for this fiscal year. It could be something that we're looking to do, like what Victor said, moving forward. This is direction of what this board, wants to, I'm gonna say, move in terms of its strategic focus,
Because I think our goals, I think our goals are going to change, even though we put these up here, because as the capital investment plan and the comp plan come together, and those type of things start coming out to us, it could impact our goals.
But I totally and completely agree. So this is a starting point.
Yeah.
Because you always got to start somewhere. So we start with this, and then you're right. We're always looking at it to make sure that it's relevant to where this city is and where it's going. But this is a starting point. And even with this, I mean, if we're going to have goals that we're gonna shoot for, whether it's a staff-generated goal or a board-generated goal, okay? It needs to at least anticipate when it's gonna be done. Okay, so like, for in other words, I'll just throw something out there. We're going to review the bylaws. Okay, we'll have the bylaws reviewed by February 2026. Totally hypothetical, but this is the end that I'm envisioning. Yeah, and it's different from that. That's a good starting point, but you can put some meat on those bones.
So back to our scenario. Again, without having those more fleshed out goal statements for the first page of the document, any initial reaction to things that just seem off, things that are close to being on target in terms of if we were allocating categorically what our operating budgets would look like, so that we know how far off either direction we are just with this first scenario.
What I would add with that is just some bullet points that specifically say, in this area, this is what we're going to do. And part of this might be the thing that you all were talking about earlier in terms of revamping the grant guidelines, because I mean that's an initiative that speaks directly to number one. So some of the bullet points could be financial, some of them could just be operational.
Yeah, I'll say, without having the detail in front of us, we made more than 55,000. This board awarded more than $55,000 in community sponsorships. I would say probably each of the last couple of fiscal years. Did you say that safe to say? Right.
Was that much?
I'm saying that this board's probably awarded more than $55,000 in sponsorships, donations, right? So, any thoughts to the impact?
Maybe.
I mean, I know what it means for this budget. That means it's more available for other strategic activities, but with respect to the motive behind historically feeling the need, feeling compelled still to make those charitable donations or sponsorships of events. If we were to say, move forward with that amount for that category, then understand it.
I don't think we can do that until we see what that is. And when I say see what that is, what did we spend $55,000 on or more? A, B, C, D.
The list
D.
of the grants that we've awarded for that. Okay.
And after we do that, we may say, hey, we did good. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but I couldn't answer it.
I guess just under your real estate, the strategic property acquisition, and I think one thing that's missing in there, and I think it would go in this line, is the promotion of properties that are available that the city or the EDC owns specifically. I've been talking about that since Gus was here, that developers have a hard time finding properties that the city may own that are available. Whereas if you go to a commercial real estate website, available properties that are listed with a broker are available. But our properties that we may say, hey, this is open if you want to discuss about it. To me, it falls under number 4. our real estate acquisition equity investments is, how do we get rid of those properties and hopefully make.
So if you look at, if you look at item number 2, we have, as part of that line item, our website overhaul. See, right now, our website is tied to the city's website, just like as a separate landing page, and you navigate through there. Some of our other fellow EDCs in the Best Southwest region, separate dedicated website where you can link directly to our CoStar, our LoopNet account, or the properties that are part of our current inventory of, say, land bank or properties that have structures on them. Right. So I would say with you on that, like there's some alignment with the staff that'll be a feature of our new website. And I would only say it's budgeted under that strategic marketing line item as opposed to under strategic acquisition. Because that, what's intended for that is, again, over the past, we'll say the past couple of calendar years, some of the properties that we've had an opportunity to acquire, and maybe some that we did some due diligence and maybe won't acquire, but being in a position to act on those opportunities is what that line item is. Okay. And here's the thing too, Greg, it may be a situation depending on the specifics of that property where this is showing up as cash that we have available under the budget. But we may have a conversation in the future about, do we want to use cash to just purchase? Or would it make sense for us to have a line of credit, right? Again, depending on the property, but where we get it under control, right? Do what we need to do. And again, it's not uncommon for investors or commercial development projects to not use cash to buy the property. Like maybe we want to withhold some of the cash for maybe due diligence, for just gap financing, et cetera. But yeah, we can go out. We've got credit worthiness or fund balance to support. So again, it's creating some flexibility for us to be strategic, right? Without actually just saying that. We also have the resources and budget authority to do it. That's what that line item is for. And it hasn't something that we've had historically. It's just been all rolled up into, incentive grants and whatnot.
So if I understand you correctly, at the end of this process, when we're done, we will have a work plan item that says redo the website, and it will be done by December, January, February. Yes.
Critical dates.
I'm sorry, I have another question. I just can't remember it. Do we have a balance sheet?
Does the corporation have a balance sheet?
The corporation's last balance sheet would be in its comprehensive annual financial report.
Which was 22?
No, we've had an audit since then. It's 24. Fiscal year in 24 is audited. It's done. That's what a balance sheet is. And it's as of September 30th, 2024.
So our properties should be in there?
That is a good question.
Yeah.
Look it up. I'm gonna look it up too. See what a good budget discussion does? See what a good budget discussion does? So I guess the next step from here is to, that'd be like a homework assignment. then we'll take it and say, okay, let's get some bullet points as to, in this category, what's part of the work plan.
And,
Just go all the way down.
and as it relates specifically though to item number 3, show kind of what, we'll say maybe our budget to actuals, or the amount of awards we made for that particular category as a tool to help evaluate what's being proposed
Mm-hmm.
moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So if I have anything else, we move that item. This would be next, if there is anything further.
Yeah. Is there anything further we need to talk about in terms of the budget? Okay. All right, so then that takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is a public hearing.
Yeah,
discussion.
Oh,
Could we discuss the matter? We can't discuss the matter, we're not having a public hearing, we're not gonna take any actions, we just
We can
hold off.
discuss it, but we can't take action.
We just wanna hold off. Well, I guess if we,
With strong towns.
yeah, yeah, you can, we can talk about that. Cause
So-
everybody doesn't know, right? Yeah,
so Strong Towns is an organization that serves as a resource to many urban planners, many professionals in improving the quality of life of their communities with very strategic projects, with very strategic methods of community enhancement, quality of life, etc. So what I have up here are just some of the values that they live up in what they're known for. This organization, just to kind of point out their reach, this is the type of reach that they have in terms of annual websites, email subscribers, YouTube subscribers, Facebook followers, LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. So big following. Why this organization is important, what's special about it is that they are known for helping municipal staff, not-for-profits, university professors, city planners, business owners. So their reach is very, very large. And so they have featured Monty Anderson and a number of his accomplishments in the city, most specifically Wheatland Plaza and all the good that he's done for the plaza, the community, and the initiatives that he's done through Main Street and in other communities. And he has been featured in Strong Towns on podcasts and articles. And so through his efforts, the city has been marketed, advertised, and again, to its followers and this large reach, if you will. And so what is up for consideration is a sponsorship of this organization. In your packet, I included the benefits of the sponsorship. What we're suggesting for consideration is a $5,000 sponsorship. Here you see a breakdown of what you get for the $5,000. But again, you're talking about an organization that has complimented and advertised Mr. Monty's accomplishments, has featured Wheatland Plaza and other properties throughout the community, and that's been broadcasted across the nation. So a lot of return on investment, if you will, and a lot of promotion of Duncanville and Duncanville properties. Just something to consider, and that's really it regarding this matter. They have an upcoming conference, which is anticipated that they will feature several projects, including Wheatland Plaza. The conference is June 9th through 11th, and so if there's a desire for the board to become a sponsor, we also, as part of that, get tickets to this event. But we need to then start making our travel arrangements as soon as possible, as the prices to go out there to the national gathering will go up as, you know, the closer we get to the event.
So where is that?
Rhode Island?
Rhode Island.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we cannot make any decisions tonight, but we do, I don't even know if we can talk about that now. Can we talk about moving our next meeting?
It's one of the items on the agenda.
Yeah, you as council president have the ability to call a meeting, so you.
Okay, all right,
Can we go back
Well-
to that one, please?
yeah.
Which one?
Yeah, this one here. So it includes 2 seats. Who are the targeted individuals to go?
That's a conversation that we wanted to have with the board. Right now, we're thinking a staff member and at least president or vice president, since this board does not have a vice president, you know, we would think the board president.
Does Mr. Anderson, is he part of the head count for this? or is
Mr.
this
Anderson is
above?
part of the organization. He is also a member, but that's separate. It's not part of us.
He's gonna be a featured panelist on, I think on the 11th is when they'll talk about him, and they'll profile Wheatland Plaza, some of the work that he's done there. But like Victor said, you know, this is really kind of started like as a think tank, grassroots movement to really kind of challenge the traditional patterns of development, right? And I've been a follower probably for the last 7 or 8 years because of some of the data that they've published that helps municipalities, right? It really kind of challenged the conventional wisdom that, you know, we're incentivizing certain kind of developments and we think we're gonna get these returns, but history has shown that that's not always the case, and just heighten some of the values of the way we approach the built environment and how we spend our precious resource and money. So I would say too, I was sharing with Mr. Harvey earlier, just some of the stuff that's out there. I'm not on social media so much, but like YouTube, for example, Neighborhood Evolution is a group that's been profiling Wheatland Plaza and some of the projects that Monty's been involved in Duncanville. So that'll help kind of more understand some of the work that this larger group. But yeah, June 9th through 11th it'll be good if we could have a presence, because I'm sure, like you said, he's gonna be there regardless, and they'll be talking about Duncanville. So it might be good to have some delegation.
I'll say, I'll be available, so, we are going to have another meeting this month, which I will call, thank you. And, that will be on the agenda for that meeting.
So can I just throw something out? What happens if we just went without the sponsorship? If you just sent 2 people without the sponsorship?
We could do that as well.
I mean, because what's the 5,000 get us above and beyond what the expenses? You still have to pay your expenses anyways. If you have 2 airline tickets, 2 hotels, those expenses are gonna be above and beyond anyway. So the only thing you're saving is 2 admission tickets.
Yes, but you're talking about sponsoring an organization and an event that has for quite some time marketed, spotlighted Duncanville, and so this is one could see it as it's a small price to pay for the continued marketing efforts and promotion efforts of the community and Wheatland Plaza, and just putting us out there across many followers. So, like I said, it's just, yes, and given the amount of, exactly.
I was gonna say, when it comes to like sponsoring, the whole point of sponsors is that more and more people get to see your logo. So if they only hear Duncanville a couple times, but they don't see it, they might not kind of remember that it's there. But if you're kind of blasted all over the marketing materials, you're shouted out, verbally during the program, you're tagged on social media, especially with the power that social media has right now, I think it would kind of benefit the DCDC especially to be seen and recognized on multiple social media platforms.
It's an opportunity to support the organization that has broadcasted the city and Monty and all its efforts for the last several years, and more than likely will continue to do that. So it's a question of, how far does $5,000 go in terms of plugging the city, putting the city in front of many professionals, and telling the story of Wheatland and other things that the city has been involved with.
Question.
Yes.
Are we planning to host a booth or share a booth, or you don't have that type of presence? That's just the sponsorship, right?
Booth, a booth is included.
Okay.
So we'd have to work out those details, but again, it's really just kind of asking what kind of appetite, what kind of desire does the board have? Again, because they've been putting Wheatland Plaza, Muncie, and Duncanville for several years, meaning it's not something that's just recently has happened. I shared with you a podcast that occurred several years ago. And they've had, and Monty has brought individuals from the organization and everything to the community, provided them a tour of Wheatland Plaza, the co-lab space, and has brought the founder here as well. So
Then my other point is, if you do go do that and you get a booth, then you gotta,
Man,
well, more the accoutrements that are in the booth. I don't know the right word for the marketing material, display material.
The stuff.
The
The
swag
goodies.
that, that's out there, so it's really above and beyond the 5,000, because, can that item be used at one event and be carried over to another event and repurposed? But then you gotta ship it there, and what's the cost of shipping it there?
Yep.
So,
it's possible, but it's also an opportunity to put yourself in front of other professionals and share ideas, and out of that could come, development, redevelopment opportunities, and you just constantly have to put yourself out there.
get back to our training flow.
That's why we have this in front of you and up for consideration. Unfortunately, we can't take a vote on this matter, but we would hope that to place this on the next meeting agenda for formal approval,
Yes.
or for formal vote, one way or another.
If you did
One
the,
question, sorry. Administratively, given the $5,000 threshold of this expenditure,
You can
without,
do it. You
that's
can
where
do
it was going, like,
Yeah.
without having
You
the
can do it.
formal.
Yes, I wanted the opportunity to share the opportunity, the value, and why, as opposed to, exercise the administrative right to do it and just talk about it after the fact. But also use as an opportunity to see if there's any interest from board members to attend the national gathering.
No, you're not limited to two, you could
I would
purchase.
say you
Yes, you could
purchase
purchase
more.
more, but these are just what's included in the sponsorship package.
yeah, because you
So
could
if we
do
got
two,
more-
and you could do whatever extra above and beyond, right?
Yes.
You guys would be interested in going.
I'm interested.
Well, so we'll bring this back.
And I think Devin should bring back any materials she needs.
I mean, listen, I make a good booth. Do a good booth.
So we can find out what box it fits into.
Okay. Moving on.
All right, so that brings us then to discussion of May EDC regular meeting date. Okay. I'll do that. So as it turns out, our regularly scheduled meeting for May is Memorial Day. And so we can't do that. And so we need another date to meet in May to discuss strong towns. And maybe something else will come up on the agenda. Who knows? But I want to make 2 points here. Number one is that we've been invited to hold our next meeting at what used to be called Redbird Mall, what used to be called Southwest Center Mall. And our host will be Dallas College organization. Cedar Valley, Mountain View, El Centro. And what they would like to do is to host us and to give us a presentation of their organization so that we can become familiarized with them, and perhaps this will be the beginning of a relationship that will benefit our community in some form or fashion. And so, with that being said, what I'd like to do is to call an EDC meeting on May the 19th, which I believe is the third Monday in May, so that we can meet at the second floor of, I guess, what do they call it now? Redbird Mall? They still Redbird Mall?
I think it's still Redbird Mall.
Okay, Redbird Mall.
The shop is over here.
I'm sorry, the shops. Redbird Mall, yes, the shops. So meet there, and on the agenda will be their presentation to us, and also Mr. Barrera will talk about strong towns again and get a commitment, or at least get a consensus of the board on that, since he can do it anyway. $5,000, yes.
I would be available on the 19th, but my opinion is we should keep the two separate. Have the 19th as our regular meeting for regular items here, and then have a separate meeting there, and them that want to attend can go there on that separate meeting. Because you're taking board business out of the city. That's just my opinion.
I think I've ever experienced a two-pronged, two different locations meeting,
Well, it'll be two different events.
two different
One on
events.
Monday, one on Tuesday, or one on Monday, one on Thursday. Whatever availability they have.
Okay.
That's just my opinion, that they should be separate. That we do a tour and hear what they have to say. I think it'd be very educational.
Maybe we can meet here, and then you talk about strong towns, 15, 20 minutes, and then we just pick up and go over there.
Why do you want to do them the same day?
Well, sometimes it can be hard to get us
I
together.
understand. Disagree.
Okay,
That's just my opinion.
We can have the entire meeting there, but just keep in mind that we'll have to do the posting at there, and we'll have to take a tablet there to record the meeting. So we'll have to just figure out those logistics, not something that we can't figure out, but we're still subject to following the
oh yeah,
Open Meetings Act, et cetera, with the posting and everything else, so I mean, that could be done, but we just have to post the agenda at that facility to be in compliance, and then we'll have to take a recording device over there with tripod, et cetera, to record the meeting.
And if we have our meeting here, do we need all that stuff over there to do a tour? If there's no action to be taken?
that's a good point.
We do not, at that point, it's a meeting you can have a meeting of a small handful of board members.
We don't have to worry
Which
about
doesn't-
quorum?
Exactly, posting, et cetera, you pick 3, and meet with them, and meet anytime between now and the 19th. And then on the 19th, we could just have a high-level summary of what was discussed, you know, and if there's anything that came out of that conversation seeking direction, we could discuss that on the 19th.
Okay. So with that being said, how many people sitting here, board members, would be interested in going over and taking a tour of Redbird?
I mean, depends on what date you pick and what time. Is it gonna be an evening or anything?
No, it going back to May 19th and 6 o'clock.
To go over there on the 19th?
Yeah.
But then your meeting's the 19th. So why
Well-
can't you go there the 12th and then meet here the 19th?
Well, even with, let's see, declare the meeting on the 19th. Okay, well,
Or
let's,
something like that?
yeah, well, how about the 20th then? 20th over there.
But then you wouldn't be able to bring back any topics that you want to discuss because you would have missed your 19th.
Ah, okay.
And I believe May 19th is also the Chamber's golf outing.
What's on the 20th?
Council. I
Yeah,
think
it's
the council
council.
meeting.
That's why, can we do a tour over there next week?
Next week, what day?
Right now,
Question.
the only
Okay.
thing that we have, I think, is the bond meeting on the 15th.
You had a question?
Is the underlying objective is for them to host us, show us their facility at that location and discuss maybe what it means, that location, the workforce component, and maybe how they'd like to build upon a relationship with the EDC, City of Duncanville.
Yeah.
So, reason why I ask that is, it sounds like it's not necessarily otherwise necessary for us to have our business meeting, whether it's regular or special, there. They just wanna host us, get that audience, show us their new facilities at that location, and also then be able to engage the board and staff on, hey, here's maybe some connective tissue with what we're doing here with maybe what your organization, like your board, might be focused on now in the future. So if that's the case, yeah, we could maybe figure out a way where we can have that couple hours to tour and discuss with them in a formal setting, and then bring that back to the board, talk about what opportunities came out of that.
So then, let me see,
Let me just ask this question, what day would you have to post anything for the agenda on the 19th?
The latest, that's a Monday.
Yeah.
It's a Monday.
The latest by law you can post it was Friday.
Right.
But we have an internal policy of getting it out Wednesday.
But
Could
you
we,
could put a placeholder there, discuss any items that came from.
could we
You can
have
word it
them,
vaguely enough that
the other one is, could we have them come to our meeting, make a presentation, and offer a tour to those that are interested after the 19th?
That's what I was thinking.
But at least they come, they make their presentation, they get the ball rolling, engage the entire board during a meeting, and then those that are interested in a tour, then we can make those arrangements.
It
All right.
works.
That's good.
So we'll have them come to us whenever we meet. If we're looking for the 19th, we'll then schedule it for the 19th. And then we'll put all other business that we weren't able to discuss and vote on that agenda, as well as any other items of discussion and matters that need to be put on the normal agenda on as well. So any new material, because it's gonna be a regularly scheduled meeting, the only thing that we're doing is moving up to date only because a regularly scheduled meeting happens to fall on a holiday.
So let me rephrase that. So the meeting for the 26th is just moved to the 19th,
Right.
which will be a regular meeting, plus if we have any guests come in to do a presentation.
Right.
And then the tour, whether it's before or after the 19th,
Will be something we can agree on
We
that
can-
night.
we can
After the fact.
we'll have the meeting with no action to be taken at that site, correct? Just
No action to be taken
on the
my-
tour.
On the
So
tour,
about the tour.
On the tour.
yes.
Right.
It's a tour. Okay. We'll set it up that way.
Okay. Any,
Think other business on the agenda.
okay. What I would like to do with, presentation of draft revision to EDC, of EDC grants and incentives, policy with discussion and, direction, we will postpone that till our next meeting. So right now, the meeting agenda for the next meeting will be to hear from Dallas College, 1, 2, Strong Towns, and 3, grants and incentives.
Targeting another meeting in June for the.
We will be,
Draft
right,
proposed
we will,
budget.
right, 4. We will be talking about a second meeting in June to finalize the budget. And Greg is grinning, I don't know why. Greg likes to meet.
On the next agenda, we'll also place the executive session item on that.
Yes, sir. You know, I always need a second set of eyes. All right, so I believe that concludes all of our business for this evening. Thank you all for coming, and this meeting is adjourned.
For this non-meeting.
This
Yeah.
meeting